Mr. Chair, I would like to table the following motion: that the committee starts a study of an emergency decree on forestries, and that this study focuses on the following elements: the social, economic effects on Quebec, given the dependency of a lot of communities on forestry, the impact of such a decree, given that the government of Quebec evaluated that at least 2,000 jobs would be affected, a plan of protection of caribou that does not affect too much Quebec, and to this end, that the committee holds 6 meetings at the least, inviting the Minister of Environment, of Natural Resources, of Transportations, as well as Innovation, Science and Industry for at least 2 hours each. The priority being given to the environment ministers 2 weeks following the tabling of this motion, and that we also invite Boissaco for 2 hours a day. That we invite Boissaco with other forestry groups, with unions representing workers, representatives from indigenous communities, and other witnesses as the committee sees fits. That we have a study on the decree, including an analysis of job loss following the adoption of this motion. The committee will send a letter to the Committee of Natural Resources to remind the chair to call back the committee to plan a study on this federal decree. The committee calls out any interference by the federal government in provincial competencies, and we will share our conclusions and recommendations to the chamber. Mr. Chair, we know that almost 2,000 people work in point of order, Mr. Chair. Yes, Madame Posey. I'm trying to see. First of all, we didn't get this motion before we start talking about it. So in the world where I'm from, the union world, when we table a motion, the person has the floor to talk about it. It might be different here. However, we have a motion here, a motion that is similar to what Mr. Deltel has just tabled. There might be a couple of amendments, but I fail to understand why we are not discussing the motion for which we are here today. Is this a normal procedure that all of a sudden we have a different motion, a motion different from the one we're supposed to be talking about? This is very interesting. This is the first time it happens to me, so I can't tell you if it's normal. We were here for Standing Order 1064. But yes, I do think that Monsieur Deltel is allowed to table his motion because it is related to the reason why we're here. It is on the topic we are here to cover today. Right, Madame Clerk? He is allowed to table this motion. And now we'll debate it, and we'll decide what to do with the motion. And then Madame Posey will be able to table her motion. So the Madame Posey's motion doesn't take precedence, right? So we'll have to talk about the priority of the motions here. So we will break. Mr. Chair, since you've given the floor to my colleague, his motion does take precedence because it has been tabled. And so from the moment my colleague had the floor and was able to table his motion, the debate has to be on this topic, on this motion, which is linked to the motion that we have in front of us. I think you might be right, but I would like to confirm with the clerk. So we'll take a break, and we'll get back to you. Mr. Deltel is allowed to table his motion. We'll debate it, and we'll see how far it goes, and then you'll be able to table your motion. But I also have Monsieur Drouin on the list. Regarding the motion? Yes, and with all due respect to our colleagues from the bloc, 1 second, I have Monsieur Deltel on a point of order. From the moment I tabled my motion, and I've let you know that I wanted to talk about it, because I started talking, I should be able to talk about this motion because I tabled it. Point of order, Chair. Well, that's a great start. That's a great start. All right, I'm a bit rusty, but I have Madame Posé, Monsieur Deltel, I have Monsieur Boulris. Right, Monsieur Martel, Monsieur Van Coeveren. Sorry, Monsieur Van Coeveren, Monsieur Martel. In that order. Oh. Monsieur Deltel tabled his motion. He is allowed to debate it. Any other points of order before I give the floor to Monsieur Deltel? Point of order, Mr. Chair. Madame Posé, is it a point of order? No, okay. Monsieur Boulris, go ahead. Simply to talk procedures, I don't think we should debate Monsieur Deltel's motion simply because we did not get a copy in both official languages. We just sent it in both official languages, so you should have gotten a copy of it. You should be getting it shortly. And just to clarify, I came here to talk about a different motion, so I don't understand why you gave the floor to someone immediately when they wanted to table a different motion. It's simply because he was fast enough to raise his hand, and his motion is related to the topic that we're covering today, so he didn't have to give us notice. This is linked to the topic that we will debate today, on the topic that motivated this meeting. And what happens with the motion we were supposed to talk about? Well, we'll cover Monsieur Deltel's motion, and then Madame Posé will be able to table her motion. Madame Posé, you have the floor. Another point of order? To be clear, you're giving the floor to Madame Posé for a point of order? No, I've asked her. It's not a point of order. So Monsieur Deltel wanted to have the floor first because he wanted to debate his motion. That's true. He hasn't done it yet. So Monsieur Deltel, Madame Posé, Monsieur Van Coeveren. All right, we'll let Monsieur Deltel talk. And then Monsieur Drouin, Madame Posé, Monsieur Van Coeveren, and then Monsieur Martel. All right, thank you, Chair. First of all, I wasn't faster than anyone else. I simply applied the standing orders, which allows us to table motions and debate those motions. We are here today to talk about the Liberal decree regarding the forestry workers and caribous. It is a topic that is very important, and my motion is covering this topic. We see the federal government, who has the bad habit to put in place decrees and is playing into the So we have 2,000 people working in this field. We have the federal playing into provincial jurisdiction. So we have the human reality here that we have to consider, because in the Conservative Party, we think that we have to help the environment, the economy, and that, yes, we have to protect the caribou, but we also have to protect jobs. And that's not only in this sector, in my province that it happens. I've met people this weekend who were affected by this situation. They wanted us to act properly for workers while protecting the environment. And this motion that we've tabled, Mr. Chair, will go into the bottom of things. We have a lot of ministers from Quebec, and we want to talk to them to make sure that we protect both jobs and the caribou, and that's the aim of this motion. Monsieur Drouin, thank you. So I would like to adjourn debate. All right, so we have to vote. Adjournment of debate.
Mr. Longfield?
Yes.
Ms. Shanahan?
Oui.
Mr. Vancouverton?
Yes.
Monsieur Drouin?
En faveur.
Monsieur Deltel?
No.
Mr. Leslie? Monsieur Lehoux?
Non.
Monsieur Berthold?
Non.
Madame Posé?
Oui.
Monsieur Baudris?
Oui.
Sept pour 4.
Alors, le débat sur la motion est adjourné.
The debate on the motion is now adjourned. Now, Madame Posé, Mr. Vancouverton, and Mr. Martel, and I think that this is about something other than the motion that Mr. Deltel tabled. Ms. Posé, go ahead. Yes, so now I am going to table my own motion. Thank you. So first of all, I am surprised to see that the Conservatives table a motion this morning, an emergency motion, even though I've been trying to reach them since August 2nd, and they have not communicated with me. They haven't communicated with me at all. So I worked. We at the bloc worked on the motion, on a motion that was tabled and presented. Madame Posé, we have a point of order. Mr. Chair, allow me to remind us all that we cannot attribute motives to our colleagues for their behaviors. The Conservatives have been trying to have emergency meetings since July on Mr. Guilbeault's emergency order on caribou. So I just want to specify I don't know if we're currently breaching the rules. So I'd like to table my motion. Yes, that motion is part of her speaking time. So I don't think a point of order is necessary. Madame Posé, you may continue. Yes, so I've been working since the beginning of the month of August, and the Bloc Québécois has been working since August to table a motion that you now have. Do I have to read the entire motion? So since you've received it in advance, that was also easier, so that the committee starts a study on the measures we need to take to adequately protect caribou by reducing the effects of economic activity from the forestry sector. That the study identify the issues that threaten caribou and the measures that can be taken to protect them. 2, the impacts of an emergency order on forestry and on caribou, the socioeconomic effects of forest fires on the communities, and the role of the forestry industry on carbon neutrality. That the committee host 3 meetings with the Minister of the Environment and public servants so that they can respond to that emergency order and the elements that they will consider, and that they also invite environmental experts, industry, unions that represent forestry workers, First Nations members, and all other witnesses deemed necessary by the committee, and that they publish and share the conclusions with the House of Commons. And we would like the members of the committee to be present to debate said motion. The fact that the minister has pushed back consultations by a month means that we are able to study this motion in depth, and it gave me time to refine the motion. During the consultations led by the minister, Minister Guilbeault, we ministers could not be heard, so it was the best way for us MPs to be heard on the topic. And this topic is at the heart of many other debates and counts for many people. People are affected and people are concerned. So we thought that participating in that debate, which is at the core of many things, needs to happen in this committee, and this is why we had to host this emergency meeting today. And I think that it generally mentions a little bit of everything. So yes, we need to keep in mind an endangered species. We do not want to take part in actions that could lead to the endangerment of caribou. But there are also forest fires, and there's also the transition of the pulp and paper industry, and there's IT, and there's tariffs that recently increased, and there are no subsidies for that sector. So we're trying to have a global view of things. And in classrooms, when there are many students who are struggling, we have specialized educators. And when these technicians enter the classrooms, the first thing that they do with a student who's struggling is that they tell them that there is no issue. There are solutions, and we are going to find the solutions together. So this is what this motion aims to do. So we know, so there might be a problem. No, there are solutions that can be found, and we can debate together to find these solutions. Thank you. Mr. Martel. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would have liked to be present in person, and I'm connecting remotely. As you may know, Pierre Poilievre, our leader, is meeting industry leaders. They're meeting people from the company Boissaco. So that's why I am not on site today. But I'm very happy that there's a meeting today. We've tried on 2 different occasions to recall the Natural Resources Committee for a meeting, and they've refused both times. So I'm very happy to meet here in this committee today. You know, my constituents have been sending us distress signals. When we meet people on the street, they show us that distress. The forestry industry, if it suffers, communities will also suffer. Companies could close, and some municipalities might also close because some employees in some municipalities are almost exclusively forestry workers. So our leader and our party believes that we should trust Quebec, and we should trust the province of Quebec to protect the industry and to protect caribou. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Martel. Does anyone else want to take the floor? Yes, Mr. Berthold? Yes, Mr. Chair. Yes, go ahead. Thank you. I would like to propose an amendment to my colleague's motion. So in the first paragraph, immediately after the forestry sector, it would say this: all economic activity related to the forestry industry, given that the government of Quebec has estimated that 2,000 jobs would be affected. So after the forestry industry, we would immediately say, given that the government of Quebec has estimated that 2,000 jobs would be affected. All right, so we'll have to debate the amendment. Who would like to start? Mr. Deltel? Mr. Vancouverden? Mr. Deltel, then Mr. Vancouverden. Thank you, Mr. Chair. We are able to do both. We are able to protect woodland caribou, but we must protect jobs too, and that is under provincial jurisdiction, and they have full powers to do so. And we already know the province's plans. And since 2018, we've known that the situation was dire. There were alerts, and the Minister of the Environment has reminded us all of that situation in a letter that he sent to Minister Guilbeault. So we are ready to find solutions, but solutions already exist. Solutions were already deployed by the Government of Quebec to protect these jobs. We believe in those solutions. We trust the Government of Quebec on the issue. So are you in favor of the amendment? You heard me, and yes. Mr. Vancouverden. Mr. Vancouverden, you have the floor.
I'll see.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and my apologies, Madame Posé. You were on the list, but not for the amendment. Sorry, Mr. Vancouverden, go ahead. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and salutations to all of my colleagues.
So I think I'll just speak English. I don't know how to switch it. I guess it's because I'm on English. Sorry about that. I would like to thank Madame Posé for her leadership in recalling the committee for this meeting. I would just say that she's been in touch with me a couple of times and with other members of the Liberal side of this committee over the last couple of weeks and months. But any effort to recall this committee from the Conservative side has happened independent of any outreach to me. I thank my friend and colleague Gerard Deltel for reaching out during the Olympics to congratulate me on 20 years since I won a medal at the Olympics, but we didn't talk about committee business. So I applaud everybody's enthusiasm and interest in this important issue. I also had an amendment to provide. I suppose I'll provide it after we conclude the,
we'll vote on this
debate on this.
Yeah.
Our efforts are to protect both jobs and caribou. I think they have to happen independently of one another, or together, I would say, and not independently of one another. But I also know that, like all aspects of nature, caribou don't vote and they don't have the ability to hire lobbyists. So sometimes we have to, consider their well-being as well, and more of an advocacy perspective, because it's not as though nature always has its lobbyists on the Hill. So I share the aspirational component of ensuring that we protect jobs and our natural environment at the same time, and I'm certain that this committee will continue its good work in consulting with stakeholders and experts in that regard, so that we can provide recommendations to the government.
Monsieur Berthold.
I am getting a bit of whiplash, Mr. Chair, because first we're talking about this motion that was tabled by the Bloc Québécois, and at the beginning of the summer, we agreed that all discussions would happen between House leaders and that we would agree to this way of doing things. And House leaders from the Bloc nor from the government did not call us and did not mention recalling this meeting. They talked about the Natural Resources Committee, and the Bloc Québécois rejected that. So I don't know why the Bloc Québécois rejected our request for a meeting of the Natural Resources Committee, which is super important for caribou and for jobs, and we would also get to talk about provincial jurisdiction. So I don't understand. And yes, they're saying that the caribou cannot hire lobbyists, but I don't know how the Bloc Québécois will continue supporting the Liberals. Currently, the government of Quebec is lobbying for caribou. They are the ones who said that there was interference, undue interference. I'm going to read what Ministers Blanchette and Charette said when they found out about the federal government's intentions to impose this radical order. They said, we agree and we want caribou to survive. And we agree with the government of Quebec. It is their jurisdiction. But I continue. Your government's use of an emergency order is undue interference. Management of public lands is under the government of Quebec's exclusive jurisdiction. And when I hear my Liberal colleagues say that the government of Quebec is lobbying when it is their jurisdiction and their responsibility, they are the ones who are able to protect forestry jobs and caribou. So that's insulting. It's a bit insulting to hear that coming from my Liberal colleague, and I don't know how the Bloc Québécois can support that position. There's a point of order.
What's the point of order?
Well, I just feel as though my words are being taken completely out of context.
We
I was
know
talking about
that's
how,
not a point of order. That's a point of debate. We hear this all the
Okay.
time in the House.
Sure.
But go. Please note, Mr.
Merci. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, I heard the comment. Yes, I know that we can't backtrack. He said what he said, and unfortunately, that's how I interpreted it. All of this is happening in a situation where, for over a year, the Conservative leader, our leader, Mr. Poilievre, has clearly denounced the federal Liberals' intent to impose a radical order that goes against Quebec's jurisdiction on their forests and their land. That happened the first time was in April 2023. We cannot agree to a motion like this one without talking about jobs and without talking about the families that may lose their jobs due to a radical position of the Environment Minister. So I support this motion. Thank you. I don't see any speakers on the amendment. Madame Posé, do you want to speak on the amendment? I'd like to know where I am on the speaking list. Okay, so I'll speak on the amendment, but I will give my colleague the floor. Mr. Simard? Yes. Mr. Chair, I would like to clarify certain things that were mentioned earlier, and I would like to explain the importance of the motion that we are discussing. My party, the Bloc Québécois, has been holding consultations on caribou for a long time. We met people in Saguenay-Lac-Saint-Jean. We met stakeholders. We spoke to biologists, professors, all of the stakeholders that have an interest in the question of the caribous. I've never heard the member for Chicoutimi ask anything about the future of the forestry industry. The Bloc Québécois proposed a plan for the future, and that plan was supported by communities, unions, workers, and that plan gave us a way forward for the measures that we would need to take at the federal level to support the forestry industry. The Bloc Québécois had a conference on the forestry industry with multiple stakeholders from the forestry sector. So to hear our colleagues say that we do not care about the forestry sector is quite hurtful. How did things happen this summer? Well, I'll explain. Mr. Guibault's consultation, well, one of the things that was unfortunate about his consultation is that it happened in the summertime. And in the summertime, forestry workers are in the forest. The summertime is not when you go out to meet the forestry workers to explain all of the ramifications of new rules. It would have been best to push back that consultation. We also needed to consult with Indigenous peoples. So, Mr. Speaker, I don't think that was the best way to go about this consultation. I don't think going to the committees and to discuss it within a committee setting would have been the best stage for this. But I am a fair player, and I thought that I could table a motion of substance, because I do not believe that we can fix the caribou situation and the issues within the forestry industry by screaming slogans. It's not by saying common sense, for example, that we're going to fix the issue. We fix issues by making diagnostics and then doing real work. And that's what the consultations aimed to do. The consultations gave us a general portrait of the situation. Caribou is one issue amongst many in that sector. The Quebec forestry sector is in survival mode and has been for the last 10 years. Why? Because there's transformation. We're going from pulp and paper to other kinds of activities because, as you may have seen, there were intense forest fires last year, and because the forestry sector also only has a very small amount of support from the federal government. The forestry sector makes a lot of financial returns, and they do their part. But the government never supports the forestry sector on the international markets. You know that the Americans are imposing tariffs, and they're close to 15% now on lumber. So now we have a motion of substance, a motion that sets aside all the cliches and that does not use the Poilievre method. The Poilievre method is to use threats and to insult. And they're trying to get the population to be more unhappy. But I don't think that's how we need to fix things. So we are tabling a motion. I have a point of order. Yes, it's going to be fascinating. Mr. Chair, I just want to say that defending Quebec's jurisdiction is not a threat. That's not a point of order. Yes, but for my colleague, we've said many, many times that the federal government will never put their fist on the forestry sector. It is not up to the federal government to control the Quebec's forestry sector. This is the Quebec government's role. We'll debate later.
As I was saying, Mr. Chair, we tabled a motion with some substance and content, but there was radio silence. We didn't hear from the Conservative Party at all. You can't negotiate parliamentary procedure on Twitter, on X. You can't just tweet and say, if you don't agree with this, it means you're lazing around on vacation. This is a stupid way of working. And if you really think about it, the Endangered Species Act is under the Department of the Environment. So this motion shouldn't be tabled to Natural Resources, but rather the Department of the Environment. My colleague, Madame Posé, sent a motion to Mr. Deltel at the beginning of August, but heard nothing back. Not a single word in answer. I don't know if Mr. Deltel was on vacation at that point, as his leader had said, or perhaps, if I were to use the same epithet that his leader has used, perhaps he was being lazy. I wouldn't dare say which it was, but what I can say is that we never got a response. We ended up negotiating with the Liberal Party to have this type of meeting, which we believe is very important. So for all these reasons, and I understand my colleague's amendment to refer to the 2,000 jobs, I do understand that. That's legitimate, but we will have time to debate all that during the committee meetings. We will have a chance to discuss all that. If he absolutely wants to add a reference to the 2,000 jobs, I have nothing against that. But I would ask them to stop this partisan politicking and stop trying to make clips for social media and instead say that we need to listen to people in the forestry sector. Mr. Martel, please. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hope my colleague will stay calm because I want to come back to what he said. He said that the forestry industry is not available to meet with us in the summer. But I will tell him something. Entrepreneurs in the sector were unanimous in thanking us for bringing forward this matter as an urgent matter. I was on the ground. People were coming to see me at my office. They were coming to see me and they were saying, this is extremely urgent. They are very concerned about the future of their sector. So it's very surprising. The Bloc Québécois refused on 2 occasions. It refused on 2 occasions to let the forestry sector speak out about the future of the industry. After all, the Bloc Québécois says it cares about Quebec jurisdiction. And we were proposing 2 meetings to talk about all this. So thank you. I just wanted to set that straight, Mr. Chair, because my colleague, who's very emotional about this, got carried away. But actually, he doesn't seem to be fully up to date on occurrences. Mr. Vancouverden.
Mr. Vancouverden.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Excusez, si vous pourriez baisser la main, Monsieur Martel, baisser la main.
Mr. Martel, could you please lower your hand?
Si, Monsieur Vancouverden.
Mr. Vancouverden.
We can spend all afternoon talking about whose idea this was or who cares more about caribou, but we should also consider just getting on with the substantive matter that we're discussing today. For our part, we support the notion of adding jobs to the motion, and we would provide a sub-amendment to that so that we can just vote once and move on, if that's okay. That sub-amendment I can distribute basically just asks for a 4th meeting, and the 4th meeting would be to accommodate 1 additional stakeholder, and that's,
sorry,
that includes.
Mr. Vancouverden, that's not a sub-amendment, it's another amendment. So we have to dispose of this one first, and then you can propose your amendment.
I think we can do it as a sub-amendment, and it doesn't negate any aspect of the current amendment on the table.
That you're proposing 4 meetings instead of 3. That would involve amending the second part of the motion, changing 3 to 4. Whereas right now we're discussing the first part of the motion, which is and the proposed amendment is to add some words at the end of the first sentence. So can we dispose of the amendment, Mr. Berthold? Was it Mr. Berthold?
If you want it to be 2 steps, then that's fine.
Yeah,
it can be 1 step if you use my method.
Otherwise, I'll get very confused as chair, and that's not a good thing. So, OK, alors, est-ce qu'on peut...
Okay, so I'll add Mr. Vancouverden after Madame Posé. Seeing no other speakers, I would ask us to move to the vote. So can we read the amendment in question, please? Has this motion been distributed? So the amendment is, given that the government of Quebec has evaluated that at least 2,000 jobs will be affected, and that will be added after forestry. Okay, that's very simple. Let's go on to the vote then, please.
Madame Chatel? No. Mr. Longfield?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear what we're voting on. Could you please clarify that?
So the amendment is, I'll read it in French and the interpreters will interpret.
I will read it in French and the interpreter will interpret. Given that the government of Quebec has assessed that at least 2,000 jobs will be affected.
That's the amendment to the motion.
Okay. In favor.
In favor? Madame Shanahan?
In favor.
Mr. Vancouverden?
In favor.
Monsieur Drouin?
En faveur.
Monsieur Deltel?
Pour.
Monsieur Lehoux? Mr. Leslie? Monsieur Berthod?
Oui.
Madame Posé?
Oui.
Monsieur Boulris?
En faveur.
Donc, l'amendement est adopté.
That amendment is carried. And now let's move on to Madame Posé and then Mr. Van Koerden.
On the list.
Mais Monsieur le Président, j'étais sur la liste pour présenter.
I was on the list to move the amendment, but that's been done, so I'll let Mr. Van Koerden go ahead.
Go ahead, Mr. Vancouver.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The amendment that I'm proposing just changes the committee hold a minimum of 4 meetings, and that the committee under B include an additional and specific stakeholder, and it would read including AFNQL's Guylaine Picard, the municipality of Sacré-Cœur, and the Boyasco Cooperation for 1 hour.
Okay, so I'll go to the English version of the motion. The amendment basically is to say, to this end, the committee hold a minimum of 4 meetings, so 3 changes to 4. But then, where do you want the second amendment to be inserted?
That will go under B. And in the French, it's different. For some reason, there's numbers rather than letters. But in the English version, it says
the First
invites
Nation concerned, I guess, comma, including.
And any other witnesses the committee deems necessary.
Yeah.
Which is there already, comma, the new part will include, including AFNQL's Guylaine Picard, comma, the municipality of Sacré-Cœur and the Boyasco Cooperation for 1 hour. I can send it to the clerk.
Can you send it to the clerk, and we'll, and then we'll have the exact wording which we can read out.
Rappel au règlement, Monsieur le Président.
Point of order, please. This is an amendment that will amend 2 completely separate portions. Yes. So do you want to start by voting on the matter of the number of meetings? Yes. Okay. Let me just make sure we have the second amendment, and then we can do them separately. Yes, I understand. So now let's start with the vote on or on the debate, with the debate to move from 3 to 4 meetings.
On your proposed amendment?
I think Mr. Berthold intervened, but I think I still have the floor. It's my amendment, and I think it's perfectly fine to have 2 sections where we amend. The reason that we're increasing the number of meetings by 1 to 4 is to include Mr. Picard. So it's not appropriate to vote in 2 rounds. It's entirely standard to just vote once on this. And I'm currently sending it to you and the clerk.
Au règlement, Monsieur le Président, juste pour vous aider.
Point of order, just in order to help you, Mr. Chair, just to help everyone for the better functioning of the committee. There are several different points here. There are different witnesses. If we go in this direction, there's going to be sub-amendments. There will be quite a lot of sub-amendments.
Mais Monsieur le Président, un amendement, un amical, là.
I have a friendly amendment. No, I'd prefer to rule on this matter. Yes, but I have a friendly amendment to propose to Mr. Van Koerden. The amendment would be that a 4th meeting be held, and that at that 4th meeting, we invite Boyasco, Guylaine Picard, and so on. That could be the wording. Yes, but the problem is that I haven't seen the wording. But if I understand correctly, Mr. Van Koerden doesn't just wish to invite Mr. Picard, he also wants to invite other people.
I know the 3 to 4 I get, but what you wanted to include the AFNQL? But what could you read your amendment again?
There are only two aspects of the motion which I intend to amend. The first is that we hold a minimum of 4 meetings. And the second is that after the current line and any other witnesses that the committee deems necessary, we include, including the AFNQL's Minister Picard, the municipality of Sacré-Cœur, and the Biasco Cooperation for an hour. And the amendment to suggest that we could, the sub-amendment or the friendly amendment, to make it like all in one sentence, it does make it seem like it's just one amendment that way, but this is totally standard, and there's no reason why we should be voting on it twice.
Here's the way I see it. Sorry, just a second. OK, alors moi, ce que je comprends.
Yes, so I understand Mr. Berthold's point. He wants to split this, and that is his right. But I deem that this is one amendment. If Mr. Berthold really wishes to split it, he can propose a sub-amendment to that end. But I would really like to see the wording of this. So could we please get the amendment's wording, both parts of it? Could we get it sent out? I think that would help everyone.
And
okay.
And
so, do you want to have anything more to say about your amendment?
Just that, we passed a CPC amendment. And, when I suggested that this could just be a sub-amendment, it was deemed not possible. I would say the same about a sub-amendment for this one. The amendment is not to split it. I say we vote on the amendment as such and move forward.
Okay.
I don't know why my sub-amendment was deemed ineligible, my recommendation, and then this sub-amendment is being considered to split it in half. I was trying to expedite, move along and have one vote for
we're gonna
ask, now we're just trying to slow it down.
Yeah. We're going to ask if anyone else wants to speak to your amendment, Monsieur Berthold.
Oui, Monsieur le Président, je voudrais déposer et ça commence.
Yes, I would like to table a sub-amendment that the committee hold at least 6 meetings.
À l'amendement de Monsieur Van Coverden, et vous.
So you want to submit a sub-amendment to Mr. Van Coverden's amendment to go from 4 to 6 meetings? Yes, and I will speak to my sub-amendment. Many people want to talk about this issue. As my colleague Mr. Martel said earlier, many people have come to his office. Many people have come out publicly in the media. Many ordinary people and workers are concerned about the federal government's decision to interfere in areas of Quebec jurisdiction, as though Quebec were not perfectly capable of protecting both caribou and jobs at the same time, as if Ottawa knows everything and can do better than Quebec on this matter. No, we need more meetings on this subject to show that the federal government is doing the wrong thing here and that it should instead trust Quebec, as we do, to protect both caribou and forestry sector workers who have not yet been able to speak up on this. We need to allow all sorts of stakeholders to speak to this issue. 4 meetings will not be enough. We agreed to invite the Boissaco group. We agreed the idea of inviting First Nations witnesses. We believe more stakeholders should be able to speak to this issue. 4 meetings will not be enough. And certainly, Boissaco should appear for more than 1 hour. They have sent a great number of letters to the federal government, maybe up to 8. They are saying that this order could be extremely negative for their industry. We owe it to workers and to the industry to have an opportunity to speak to this issue appropriately. That is why I move that instead of 4 meetings, we bring the total to 6 meetings to be held as soon as possible. Madame Posé, please, on the sub-amendment, please. Yes, on the sub-amendment, we believe that 4 meetings will be sufficient. Why? Because we are also going to need to draft a report. We're going to need to study it. This will delay things. We believe that 4 meetings will be sufficient. We need to remember that this committee is also focusing on other issues which also affect jobs and people's health. We can't forget about our other files. So we think that 4 meetings are sufficient to cover everything that we have on the table. That will give us time to draft the report. Other speakers on the sub-amendment? Mr. Deltel, please. Mr. Speaker, it is very unfortunate to see that we're not able to agree on adding just 2 meetings. For us, things are very clear. As Mr. Martel and Mr. Berthold clearly stated earlier, thousands of people will be directly affected, and beyond forestry sector workers, there will be socioeconomic repercussions in these entire regions. That's why we need to hear from as many witnesses as possible. I would remind you, Mr. Chair, that in our previous motion, which was unfortunately voted against by everyone except us, well, in that motion, we were asking for witnesses from all possible sectors, and especially from the ministers responsible appear, because we're seeing a unique situation. The federal government is interfering with an entirely provincial area of jurisdiction, and in addition, is now creating an emergency order. Well, I think that to ask for 4 ministers to appear is not that shocking of a request. I'd like to hear how they justify this, whether it be the Quebec lieutenant to come up here. I would love to hear what he has to say about this. What does he think of this? What about the Minister of Industry, who loves globe-trotting, using Canadian money and handing it out happily to multinationals? Well, what does he actually think about the impacts in actual Quebec on people living in Quebec? And the same thing, of course, for the Minister of the Environment. So if we hold it to only 4 meetings, that's not enough. 6 meetings would give us enough time to hear from everyone that we need to hear from. And I know that Madame Posé has been a parliamentarian for a long time and has a great deal of experience. And yes, she's right. We're going to need to do more work in addition to hearing from witnesses, and that's going to take further meetings. Yes, I understand. But should we really sacrifice hearing from people from the industry, people who are directly affected by all this, and environmental specialists who will give us their point of view? Are we really going to argue about this for just 2 meetings, such a small difference? Let's all work together to help people.
Okay, Monsieur Berthold.
Monsieur Berthold. Mr. Chair, it is very important to have these extra hours. And to answer Madame Posé's questions, we don't have to do it in September in the normal schedule. We can do it next week. We can hold all of our meetings next week because we know it's an emergency. There's a lot of concerns among the communities. And so it wouldn't affect the rest of our work. We could hold our 6 meetings rather, during the same week, and we'd be able to go through everything and make sure that everyone is heard. We're not stuck here as a committee to the regular schedule. We could do it next week. Everyone would be heard. So I don't know why we have to limit ourselves to 4 meetings when a lot of people have a lot to say about this radical order. Before going to Madame Posé, I would like to say that we need a certain notice to witnesses to allow them to get organized so they're ready to testify here. So doing it in a couple of days is ambitious. Madame Posé. Realistic ambitions are a good thing. I would like to give the floor to my colleague, Monsieur Simard. For once, I agree with my conservative colleagues. It is true. We can't believe that Ottawa knows best. We want to defend Quebec's interest, and I hope that the Conservatives, when comes the time to talk about Bill 21, they will remember this. But why 4 meetings, Mr. Chair? Because what this report has to do is to influence the minister when he will write his order. And the minister wants to finish his consultations by end of September. So I want to hear the witnesses that will show us a different side of the story. So if I want to influence the minister's decision, then we have to act quickly to make sure that the minister understands the issue and understands what our witnesses have to say. I've lived this situation in the Natural Resources Committee. We want to make sure that this is not about putting forward an ideology. We will not invite the whole of all of the ministers. We want to hear the main stakeholders, hear them as soon as possible, so that the committee can make its recommendations, that the minister respects Quebec's jurisdictions, and that's the most important. Thank you. Monsieur Van Couvernet?
Deltel, no. Okay, we'll go straight to Mr. Deltel.
Oui, Monsieur le Président. Entendre le
I'd be curious to hear it's kind of curious to hear the member from the Bloc Québécois saying, always complaining about the federal intervening in provincial jurisdictions. What happened earlier, we have tabled a motion saying that the committee is against all interference by the federal in provincial jurisdictions. And who voted against it? Well, it was a Bloc. Now, if the Bloc wants to hear only one minister, that's fine for him, I understand. But I think that the Quebec lieutenant will have to talk here and let us know on which side he is. Is he on the side of the Quebec Premier or on the side of the Liberal Party? This is not theory. It's very much based in reality. I think that the Minister of Natural Resources has to testify because we want to hear him. We couldn't hear him in the Committee of Natural Resources because the Bloc voted against. 6 meetings is very little for this issue when we consider that 2,000 jobs are being threatened by this Liberal government. I don't see any other hands up. Mr. Chair, Monsieur Van Couverden?
I just want to point out that, like, the Conservatives have arrived here suggesting as though that this meeting was their idea. It was not. They didn't propose 6 meetings until I proposed 4. And if it was really important to them to have 6 meetings, then they would have arrived with their initial motion, which they crafted seemingly overnight because nobody on the committee had heard of it. It would have been their priority. It seems as though they want to take full credit for this meeting. That's fine. But they didn't propose 6 meetings until I proposed 4. So if they thought it required 6, then they would have come prepared with that, and they didn't. This meeting was not their idea. It was Madame Posé's. So let's just get on with it and vote and have these important meetings so that we can get to the real work.
Are we good with voting on the sub-amendment, which is to change 4 meetings to 6? Okay, let's go.
Madame Chatel? Mr. Longfield?
Opposed.
Mr. Van Couverden?
Against.
Monsieur Drouin?
Contre.
Madame Shanahan?
No.
Monsieur Deltel?
Oui.
Mr. Leslie? Oui. Monsieur Lehoux?
Oui.
Monsieur Berthold?
Oui.
Madame Posé?
Non.
Monsieur Baudresse?
Contre.
4 pour, 7 contre.
Donc,
So the sub-amendment was defeated. Monsieur Berthold. Monsieur Berthold's mic is not on. Okay. I would like... The second amendment is... I have it in French somewhere, including the APMQL, the municipality of Sacré-Cœur, to cooperative Bois-Sacco for an hour. The question is it 1 hour for all these witnesses or for each of them? So what I would like to propose is that we hear each one of these witnesses for 2 hours each, including Ghislain Picard from Sacré-Cœur, Bois-Sacco, for 2 hours each. I have the English version.
Each.
Okay.
Debate, or can we vote? You want to debate? Sure. Of course, Mr. Chair, but I won't take too long. I have letters here that were sent by stakeholders in the forestry industry, by the government of Quebec. I have a letter signed by Bois-Sacco saying that was sent to the Prime Minister Trudeau. And let me just quote some bits of this letter. Mr. Prime Minister, you need to know that it is impossible to replace the losses by other different regions. It seems you have magical thoughts. Sustainable development can help climate change. Here we have these two issues. We have scientific explanations that will be made by Bois-Sacco, so it will take more than 2 hours for Bois-Sacco to talk to us about this whole issue. Let us know why it is impossible for Bois-Sacco to replace the amount that would be lost. Point of order? We're debating the sub-amendment regarding whether or not the witnesses will have an hour or two. So I would like to know here what's the link to the sub-amendment. We'll see. I spoke well in French. I'm explaining why we need 2 hours for Bois-Sacco, Mr. Chair. I have a lot of respect for people here, for witnesses who present to committees, unlike yourself, Mr. Drouin. It is important to hear them. I'm not like you. I don't have a disrespectful attitude towards witnesses coming into to present to committees on which I sit. I have a letter from Monsieur Saint-Gelais, Monsieur Gilbert. Your government has a choice. Either it will follow Monsieur Guilbeault's ideology or will stop this threat of order. And he is quoting Alphonse de Lamartine saying, we don't have two hearts, one for animals or humans. We only have one heart for everyone. So what Bois-Sacco is saying is that we have to protect both jobs and caribous. And Bois-Sacco wants to come here and let us know why. In an hour, it won't be enough time for them to let us know. Litière Royale, Ribco have also sent letters. We didn't have the opportunity to talk about it, but we'll probably add them to the witness list. They also want to talk to us. Let me quote their letter to the Prime Minister. Benjamin Dufour de Ribco. Unlike what your Minister of Environment is doing is not finding proper solutions. Mr. Chair, these people have a lot of things to say. We can't give them only an hour to talk about a topic that is so important. We're talking about 2,000 jobs. The future of the woodland caribou is an issue. So we have to make sure that we work together to protect both jobs and the caribou. And so it's important to have 2 hours to hear Boissaco. Mr. Vancouveren.
Again, I applaud the Conservatives' recent interest in more meetings, and I would just say that if it was their priority and their strong opinion that we needed to have more, then they would have arrived at this meeting with their motion that they ran off the hop and the top of this meeting with those changes, but they didn't. So, we arrived at this meeting with these proposed changes to accommodate 3 additional stakeholders. It's very standard to have an hour for 3 stakeholders. That's 15 minutes for opening statements and an additional 45 or an hour 45 for questions. It's more than adequate, and I would like to move on to voting on this amendment. And again, I'd thank the Conservatives again for their recent interest in engaging with stakeholders on this subject.
Madame Chatel.
Oui, écoute, je trouve.
It's fascinating to think that we're in 2024 and that the Conservatives think that we can have an economy that isn't based on healthy environment. It doesn't make any sense. Put your heart where your words are. It's unbelievable to think that we can have an economy that isn't based on the protection of the environment. Of course, we want to protect biodiversity. The caribou is also part of the economy. It's not just environmental. Both go hand in hand. And we need this sector. We need a good environment to have a good economy. So I don't see where the issue is. With all due respect to my colleague, Monsieur Berthold, who was talking about respect towards witnesses, we also need to respect your colleagues. He keeps speaking at the same time as other members. Is it a point of order? Yes, sir. Well, I'd like to have a point of order too. I'm losing count of points of orders now. Monsieur Berthold, it'll be short. I could have called a point of order on how relevant Madame Chatel's comments were, and I didn't. Next time I will. Madame Chatel, you had the floor, so I'll let you carry on. Thank you. It seems to be a habit for Conservatives to interrupt me and try to talk louder than me. It's their new style of politics, especially towards their female coworkers. So we'll build our armor and we will face this new reality, which is unfortunate for democracy. However, it's becoming a habit. So coming back to what I was saying, a healthy economy and a healthy environment go hand in hand. We have to protect the caribou. It's not just an issue in Quebec. We have an act that is protecting endangered species, and that is what we are debating. We have to respect jurisdictions. There is no debate on this. The Conservatives want to be political about it, but for them everything is political. So, that being said, I simply wanted to remind everyone that it is important for the forestry industry, for our jobs. I think that our forestry workers and companies want certainty, so we have to be heard. We have to make sure that our communities are being heard. I think that 4 sessions are enough because we want to be heard before conclusions are being made. So consultations are going until September 15th, so we are limited in time. So I will support the amendment that was tabled for 4 meetings. Our amendment, 4 meetings. Okay, so we need to vote on the second sub-amendment. Monsieur Berthol's second sub-amendment, asking for each witness may speak for 2 hours. Could we vote on this one? And then we'll move on to the amendment as amended or not.
Chatel?
Contre.
Mr. Longfield?
No.
Mr. Vancouverden?
Contre.
Monsieur Drouin?
Contre.
Madame Shanahan?
Contre.
Monsieur Dattel?
Pour.
Mr. Leslie? Monsieur Lehoux? Monsieur Berthold?
Oui.
Madame Posey?
Non.
Monsieur Baudres?
Contre.
7 contre, 4 pour.
OK, donc le sous-amendement,
The sub-amendment was defeated. We are going to the original amendment by Monsieur Vancouverden. Could we vote on it? I think we've debated it enough. I think we went through the whole question. So let's vote on the amendment as proposed by Mr. Vancouverden.
Oui.
Mr. Longfield?
In favor.
Mr. Vancouverden?
In favor.
Monsieur Drouin?
En faveur.
Madame Shanahan?
En faveur.
Monsieur Dattel?
Contre.
Mr. Leslie? Monsieur Lehoux? Monsieur Berthold?
Contre.
Madame Posey?
Oui.
Monsieur Baudres?
En faveur.
donc l'amendement,
Monsieur Vancouverden's amendment was passed. Could we vote on the motion as amended? Mr. Chair, I have an amendment, and so we would like to add in the bullet points 1, 2, 3, 4 in Roman numbers, the third element. I'm sorry, I'm lost now. So if we come back to the initial motion, I'm looking for the French version. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, ABC. Are you talking about 1, 2, 3, 4 or ABC? 1, 2, 3, 4 in Roman numbers, so we would like to add on the third one, between the 2 and 3, the following element. The social economic impact on on Quebec's communities. To add it, please. Could you read it, please?
les effets socio-économiques des incendies de forêt sur les communautés.
So the social economic impact of an emergency order on Quebec's communities. I'd like to add that element. So at the end of the sentence. So it would probably be best to read it because we're talking about the effects. So we would add it immediately after. So what we're saying is that we would just be adding it. So an extra line. Yes, I'm trying to understand because it says the socio-economic effects of forest fires on communities, and we would add something. So the first paragraph is okay with our amendment. We're very happy. And then there's 1, 2, 3, 4. So after 2, what we suggest is to add the following sentence. The socioeconomic effects of an emergency order on Quebec's communities. So 3 becomes 4 and 4 becomes 5. Okay, so that's clear and you all have it. Would you like to debate it? Well, it brings us back to what we were saying earlier. So an emergency order is an extreme measure that we should only use as a very, very last resort. And if the government wants to infringe upon jurisdiction, sure. And this is not just about legal battles. Emergency orders have a direct impact on thousands of people, especially the 2,000 people who work in the forestry sector. Mr. Chair, can we clarify? Is this an addition or a replacement? So after 2, we are adding. So point 3 becomes 4 and 4 becomes 5. Yes, that's exactly right. So would someone like to speak on this? Would you like to express whether you're for or against? Well, I am an MP for Quebec, so of course we support Caribou communities and affected Quebec communities. Are we limiting ourselves? Is this sentence limiting us in the scope? No, it doesn't limit us. But here we're talking about forest caribou, woodland caribou, and this is not a species that is only in Quebec, but those who will come and testify will talk about their experience. This is why this is an issue that is provincial and not federal, because realities are different in different places. Yes, thank you. I think that you've clarified, and I understand very well that right now it's an issue that is affecting Quebec, but we have a federal act. So I can remind you that we have an Endangered Species Act and that it is under our jurisdiction. Am I wrong, Mr. Deltel? Maybe I'm getting confused with all the jurisdictions. The federal government has an Endangered Species Act. Yes, that act is federal. And now Mr. Deltel is saying that it is not a federal act. The amendment only mentions the impact. Yes, but he's saying that it's not our jurisdiction, but it's a federal act. So there is a link. It's related. Yes, but even though it's even though it is under federal jurisdiction, there can be an effect in the communities. No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that we completely agree that the impact of that order is felt here in Quebec. And as a member for Quebec, I was wondering whether caribou has a similar order other than in Quebec. The answer currently is no, so I wanted to clarify that. Our colleague clarified, and I thank him sincerely. All right, can we vote on Mr. Deltel's amendment? I see raised hands. Was it Mr. Boulris before Mr. Vancouverland? Okay, so Mr. Boulris, you have the floor. Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a very important discussion today, and there are 3 main issues: protecting and defending workers, consultations, adequate consultations with Indigenous communities in the spirit of reconciliation. And on June 21st, the Quebec Superior Court said that the government of Quebec did not adequately consult Indigenous communities. So we should keep that in mind. And the third thing is our responsibility to protect endangered species and protecting biodiversity. I see that my colleague's amendment focuses on just one aspect and not on the other 2, even though we have responsibilities towards biodiversity and endangered species. COP15 happened in Montreal, and we heard wonderful speeches, but those speeches need to translate into action. Here we only mention one of the 3 aspects, and it's a little bit redundant given that the Bloc already tabled a motion that mentions jobs and economic activities in regions across Quebec. I could vote for or against, but I do not think that it is necessary to add anything else to the motion. It already takes into account the interests of the industry and workers.
Mr. Vancouverland, you want to say something?
Just very briefly, that any species at risk or endangered species is entirely jurisdiction of the federal government, and that when caribou cross territorial and provincial borders, they don't have to surrender any papers or anything like that at the border. Just like water pollution and air pollution, caribou do not respect provincial and territorial borders.
Monsieur le Président, juste un éclaircissement pour mon...
Mr. Chair, I would like to clarify something for our colleague and Mr. Boulris. So the reason why we're not talking about caribou, it's because on point 1, we're talking about elements affecting caribou, so these animals are affected. But what the motion does not contain is the emergency order, and this is what we're adding to the argument. So this is not about redundancy. This is because the order is an emergency order. And if the minister hadn't been so aggressive and might I even add imperialistic, maybe we wouldn't be here today. But since we're talking about an emergency order, we need to mention it and add it. I don't see any other raised hands, so we can proceed to vote on Mr. Deltel's amendment.
Mr. Longfield?
In favor.
Mr. Van Couverden?
Wait.
Monsieur Drouin?
En faveur.
Madame Shanahan?
Oui.
Monsieur Deltel?
Oui.
Mr. Leslie? Monsieur Lehoux? Monsieur Berthod?
Oui.
Madame Posé?
Oui.
Monsieur Boulris?
En faveur.
Okay, tout en faveur.
Ah, nous avons l'unanimité. Alors,
So the vote is unanimous. Now let's vote on the motion. Is there an amendment? So, Mr. Chair, in paragraph A, it says invites the Minister of the Environment and officials, and this is where I'd like to add the amendment, and I'm going to submit it to the clerk in both official languages. Here it is. So, invites the Minister of the Environment and officials to respond during 2 hours independently in the 7 days that follow the adoption of the motion. So we would add appear during 2 hours independently in the 7 days that follow the adoption of the motion. And then it would continue on the subject of the emergency decree and the elements, blah, blah, blah. So yes, and Mr. Chair, I'd like to add something. The minister has voluntarily contravened the Quebec government's jurisdiction on the matter of caribou and jobs, so the minister needs to explain himself and defend his position. He'll need to explain how he can act in such a unilateral and radical way against communities that are affected by this order. The chief forester was very clear. He said that there are very important effects on communities in Quebec, so the minister needs to be here and give accountability and explain the motives behind this emergency order. That's why we've been wishing for a meeting since the beginning of the month of July. We cannot wait for the minister to come speak to us, so we'd like him to appear in the 7 days that follow the adoption of the motion. Madame Posé, I have a question. I'd like to get some clarification. So they would appear for 2 hours independently. What does that mean? 2 hours for the minister, 2 hours for the officials? So 2 hours for the minister, 2 hours for him independently, so him without officials. So the minister would get 2 hours. Sometimes ministers can be accompanied by officials, but we don't want the officials to be witnesses here. We want the minister himself to testify. In other words, Mr. Chair, usually we have 1 hour with the minister and then 1 hour with the officials, but what we'd like to see is the minister to be here for 2 hours and that he answers our questions.
OK, d'accord. Madame.
All right, Madame Châtel. I love our environment minister. He does an excellent job. He listens. He leads consultations. But I also want to hear the experts from the department. So I absolutely want to hear, well, I don't know what my Conservative colleagues think about it, but I want to hear from the people who are responsible for this file on a technical level. Yes, the minister is important, but I also want to hear the officials. And for me, the important thing is to hear the minister and the officials before September 15th, which is the final day of consultations. Might I suggest something? A small modification. You can tell me if that works for you. So the minister would appear for 2 hours with his officials. Therefore, he would be there for 2 hours. So it explains that we want the minister and his officials. Yes, but yes, the minister wants to appear, but we also need to have other experts. Mr. Berthold.
Okay. Alors,
So I have a small modification to suggest so that to clarify things. So the minister would appear for 2 hours with his officials. So we want him to be there for 2 hours, and we also want his officials to be there. Mr. Chair, I want to hear from the minister. He can choose who will come with him, but I don't want the officials to be testifying at the table. Yes, but he would be there for 2 hours. Yes, I want to hear the minister for an hour, but I also want to hear the legal experts, the scientists. So the minister can stay, but I would like to have 1 hour with the minister and 1 hour with the officials. I want to hear them and I want to ask questions of them. Yes, but I think you agree that officials can come along with the minister. I never said the opposite. Okay, so 2 hours. So he has to be there for 2 hours, the minister, in the company of his officials. We don't need to add all of that. So the minister would be there for 2 hours. I think that saying that the minister shows up independently adds a gray area. Okay, so we can say that the minister appears for 2 hours independently. Yes, so we agree that the minister can appear with his officials, and we will hear from him. So can we move on to the vote? My apologies, Mr. Chair. I agree with what Mr. Berthold and yourself are saying. However, I would like to remind you that the committee will meet for 4 sessions, 4 meetings. So I do not want to impose time limits to the minister. So I would remove in the 7 days that follow. So Mr. Drouin has a sub-amendment. Can we vote on Mr. Drouin's sub-amendment? So we would remove the in the next 7 days portion. He would like to remove in the 7 following days. It would be a bit tight. Well, you can decide whether you agree or not, but we can vote on the idea of removing in the 7 days that follow. Mr. Chair, clarification. So we would remove independently? No, that's agreed. Mr. Berthold agrees. So we can remove independently, but we vote on in the next 7 days. That's what we're voting on. Because Mr. Berthold agreed on independently because it didn't clarify things. So can we vote on the 7 days that follow? Mr. Chair, I would like to bring something up very respectfully. We have a long history of presences and absences from the minister. So I think that if we don't impose the 7 days, he could come to us in 6 months. And that's if he remembers. And that would be unfortunate. And it's happened way too many times. So unfortunately, I disagree. All right, can we vote on this? Madame Clerk, go ahead.
Madame Chatel?
Pour raturer.
Ms. Chatel? Yes, so we're talking about removing the 7 days?
Mr. Longfield?
In favor.
Mr. Van Couverden?
In favor.
Monsieur Drouin?
En faveur.
Madame Shanahan?
Oui.
Monsieur Deltel,
Non.
Mr. Leslie, Monsieur Lehoux, Monsieur Berthod,
Non.
Madame Posé,
Oui.
Monsieur Boulris.
En faveur.
D'accord. OK. Est-ce que... Oui, alors c'est adopté.
So the motion has passed. Now, let's vote on the amendment as amended. So that means without independently and without in the 7 days that follow. We would simply be voting on the amendment. Mr. Chair, I think that we can reach a compromise. I've had discussions with the other side, and I think that if we say in the 14 days that follow, everyone would be satisfied, and it would ensure the minister's presence. So can we propose a sub-amendment to our amendment? Mr. Deltel will do it. Yes, because we're running out of time and I'm trying to speed things up. So Mr. Deltel has a sub-amendment to Mr. Berthold's amendment he wants to add. So we removed in the 7 days that follow, and we're instead saying in the 14 days that follow. Yes, Mr. Chair, I'd like to know how much we can return to the same issue. How many times can we talk about the delay we allow the minister to have for his visit? Yes, we're not talking about 7 days, we're talking about 14 days. Yes, but I just removed the 7 days. Yes, but we're no longer talking about 7 days. So Mr. Deltel proposes in the next 14 days. So there may be an agreement So you're removing it? Well, the consultations end on September 15th. So the issue is important. The minister will evidently show up within that time window. Yes, okay, so Mr. Deltel is removing his amendment. So let's vote on the amendment as amended. So now we're not talking about independently. We're not talking about the 7 days. These things have been removed from the amendment. So shall we vote on the amendment?
Mr. Longfield,
In favor.
Mr. Vancouverden,
In favor.
Monsieur Drouin,
En faveur.
Madame Shanahan,
En faveur.
Monsieur Deltel,
Pour.
Mr. Leslie, Monsieur Lehoux, Monsieur Berthod,
Pour.
Madame Posé,
Oui.
Monsieur Boulris.
Pour.
Parfait. Est-ce qu'on peut voter maintenant sur...
Wonderful. Mr. Chair, rather. Mr. Chair, I have an amendment to submit that the Minister of the Environment and Climate Change of the Government of Quebec, Mr. Benoit Charest, be invited. I would like to add that. Add that to the list after Section A. Very well. So after the Minister of the Environment and officials, that we invite Quebec's Minister of the Environment, Climate Change and Parks, Mr. Benoit Charest. Very well. Invite the Minister of the Environment and officials, and then after that, Quebec's Minister of the Environment, Climate Change, Fauna and Parks, Mr. Benoit Charest. So the idea is to invite Bernard Charest, the Quebec Minister of the Environment. That's what would be added here. It's what would be added to subsection A here. Does everyone understand what Mr. Deltel is moving here? He wants to invite the Quebec Environment Minister, Madame Posé. Well, my question is regarding the fact that sometimes we invite ministers and they don't come. Answer, yes, they have that option. So in this case, has Mr. Deltel received a commitment from the minister? I doubt it, but we can hear. Well, have I ever made a statement without having checked it? Have you ever seen me do that? The chair will not speak to that. But do you think he will accept? Answer, yes, I think there are good chances that he will. Well, there are good chances that he'll accept is not a firm answer. Well, yes, but he has the option to decline the invitation, and that's outside our control. We don't want to interfere in Quebec jurisdiction. This is outside our control. We can't force him to come. Does everyone agree? Mr. Vancouverton.
Bringing in.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The motion already says that we can, list anybody we would like as an amendment or as a witness. I'm sorry. The Conservatives are well within their rights to invite anybody that they'd like on that list. I appreciate that perhaps the Conservatives have run out of proposed amendments and sub-amendments, but this one doesn't apply because it's already captured in the original motion. So I would ask that it be deemed redundant because it's unnecessary. We can invite.
I won't call. I won't rule it redundant. I mean, we're naming people all over the motion. But it stands as far as I'm concerned. But can we just vote on it? Yeah. Alors, can we vote on it? Then we'll vote on the entire motion. Hopefully.
No.
No. Okay. We have more amendments after. But let's get rid of this one. Okay.
Madame Chatel.
Je vois pas ça comme nécessaire. Est-ce que je peux faire...
Can I make a point of order? We've called the vote.
Mr. Longfield?
Against.
Mr. Vancouverton?
Against.
Monsieur Drouin?
Contre.
Madame Shanahan?
Against.
Monsieur Deltel?
Pour.
Mr. Leslie? Monsieur Lehoux?
Pour.
Monsieur Bartad?
Pour.
Madame Posé?
Oui.
Monsieur Boulris?
Contre.
Cinq pour, 6 contre.
Et donc, on les...
So he will not be invited. The amendment is rejected. And if we don't adopt this, there will be no meeting. If we don't adopt this motion. So it sounds like Conservatives are presenting amendments to avoid having a meeting because they're presenting amendment after amendment after amendment. Are you in favor of this or not? Well, 4 of these amendments were adopted, and that's actually improving our work. Yes, we've only got around 15 minutes left. And if I understand correctly, Mr. Deltel wants to present another amendment, and he has a right to do that, but let's move forward quickly. Well, I have several other amendments. One moment, please. Mr. Deltel has the floor. Invite the Minister of Natural Resources, the Minister of Transport, the Minister of Innovation, Science and Industry for 2 hours respectively.
Là-dessus? Appel au règlement, Monsieur le Président.
Point of order, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Vancouverton, you wish to speak to this amendment?
I think it's up to you as chair whether or not we entertain endless amendments on this or if we vote on the original motion.
I can't stop people from proposing amendments. I can't do that.
No, but I think you can move directly to vote on the original motion. I truly think it's up to you, given the amount of time that we have today, to vote on the main motion or to just entertain this
But what I will do, I can't do that. I can't do that. But what I will do is I will exhort members of the committee to get through this quickly. If you have an amendment, if a member has an amendment to propose, fine. But let's just vote on it and get this motion passed. So, I mean, so that we can organize the meetings.
But respectfully, Monsieur Deltel just indicated that he has lots more amendments.
Well, maybe
so.
not.
It's clear what they're doing. If we want to just
but then we'll run out of time. Then we'll run.
This is a standard way to run a meeting.
Mr. Vancouver,
endless.
Yes, Mr. Vancouver, it's yes, I understand what you're saying. And if we just keep going on endlessly, what's going to happen is we're going to run out of time, and there won't be a motion, and we're not going to have a study. And I think everybody here wants to look at this. So okay, well, whatever. Maybe not everybody wants to look at this, but the point is, I think we want to maybe we don't. I don't know what the committee wants. Let's vote on this one. So,
no.
Pardon?
Je vote non.
Oui, on peut voter? Okay, let's vote on this one.
Je vote non.
Madame Chatel?
Non.
Mr. Longfield?
No.
Mr. Vancouverden?
No.
Monsieur Drouin?
Non.
Madame Shanahan?
No.
Monsieur Deltel?
Oui.
Mr. Leslie? Oui. Monsieur Lehoux? Oui. Monsieur Berthold?
Oui.
Madame Posé?
Non.
Okay.
Monsieur Boulris?
Okay.
Non.
C'est rejeté. Alors, vous avez un autre amendement?
Okay, that was rejected. Yes, I have another amendment here. Point of clarification. I see that it's 1:50. Initially, we had scheduled 2 hours for the committee, but I just want to state that we have dealt with the 1064. We should deal with 1064, so we should vote on the motion. But I would like to ask the clerk. I would stay here until 5. I would like to ask the clerk if necessary. But how long do we have resources for? Because I imagine that everyone here wants to vote on the main motion. Yes, but we're losing time now. Yes, you're quite right, Mr. Chair. Now, the amendment is the following. To add to the list, order the government to produce all socioeconomic analyses of the impacts of the federal order, including analysis of loss of jobs that could be predicted for the 14 days following adoption of the order.
Est-ce qu'on peut voter là-dessus? Oui. Alors, allez-y, Madame la greffière.
Madame Chatel?
Non.
Mr. Longfield?
No.
Mr. Vancouverden?
No.
Monsieur Drouin?
Non.
Madame Shanahan?
No.
Monsieur Deltel?
Oui.
Mr. Leslie? Yes. Monsieur Lehoux?
Oui.
Monsieur Berthold?
Oui.
Madame Posé?
Oui.
Monsieur Boulris?
Oui.
Ça l'a passé. 16 pour 50.
OK.
J'ai un amendement, Monsieur le Président.
Vous avez un amendement.
An amendment? So yes, again in the list, to add the following. That the committee send a letter to the Committee of Natural Resources to ask the chair to recall the committee to plan for a study on this federal order.
On va donner à notre greffière un moment pour se rattraper.
We'll just give the clerk a moment to catch up.
Monsieur Longfield?
No.
Mr. Vancouverden?
No.
Monsieur Drouin?
Non.
Madame Shanahan?
No.
Monsieur Deltel?
Oui.
Mr. Leslie? Yes. Monsieur Lehoux?
Oui.
Monsieur Berthold?
Oui.
Madame Posé?
Non.
Monsieur Boulris?
Non.
Donc, c'est rejeté.
Monsieur le Président.
Oui.
J'ai un autre amendement.
I have another amendment, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Chair, it's a very short one. That the committee denounce all federal interference into provincial jurisdiction.
Point F, juste avant les conclusions.
Just before the conclusion.
D'accord. Alors, c'est vrai que c'est simple.
Oui.
Yes, that's very simple. Can we vote on that?
C'est pas pertinent à la motion.
This is not relevant to the motion.
On ne va pas débattre de l'ingénierie.
We're not going to be debating interference or non-interference. We have federal legislation here. And it's our job to debate that federal legislation and its impacts. This is not a session of constitutional law debate. This is completely irrelevant.
Rappel au règlement.
Madame, oui, allez-y.
Point of order, Madame Shanahan. Yes, I'd like to get a ruling from the chair on the relevance of this amendment to the motion. Well, just a moment. I will give my opinion on this. All sorts of things are being added here. In my opinion, this is straying quite far from the subject matter of the motion. We're getting into constitutional debate. It's true that there's federal legislation. At a certain point, the courts will rule on this, like with Kondiak, when there was a decree, when there was an order on that. I think that this is overstepping the bounds of what the motion is about, just for political reasons.
The chair.
Non, moi, je trouve que ça c'est pas pertinent, là. Pardon?
Bon, c'est fini avec les amendements?
Are we done with the amendments here? We'll never be done with all this if it goes on like this. Could you please give your ruling, Mr. Chair? No, I don't think this amendment is in order. That's your ruling? Answer yes.
Bon, est-ce qu'il y a d'autres amendements? OK, alors est-ce qu'on peut voter sur la motion?
No more amendments? Well, can we vote on the motion as amended?
Madame Chatel?
Oui.
Mr. Longfield?
Yes.
Mr. Vancouverden?
Yes.
Monsieur Drouin?
En faveur.
Madame Shanahan?
En faveur.
Monsieur Dattel?
Oui.
Mr. Leslie? Monsieur Lehoux?
Oui.
Monsieur Berthoud?
Oui.
Madame Posé?
Oui.
Monsieur Boulris?
Et oui.
Bravo! Donc, la motion a été adoptée.
Congratulations, everyone. Good work. And now I adjourn the meeting.
On travaille là-dessus. And then we'll send them a note saying we'd like your suggestions by Wednesday, 5 p.m. for witness. Yeah, okay.